Welcome to the Fathering Strong podcast, where we connect, engage, and empower fathers to be the best dads they can be for their families and communities. And now, your hosts are Bruce Stapleton and Pastor Eli Williams.
Hello and welcome to the Fathering Strong podcast. I'm Eli Williams, delighted to have you here with me today on behalf of Bruce Stapleton, who is our engineer and producer. We call him the Wizard, taking care of things behind the scenes. Fathering Strong is a part of fatheringstrong.com, and we'll talk about what all of that is as we get later into the program. In the meantime, I've got a wonderful guest today that I've been looking forward to being with. His name is Aaron Roy. Aaron is a friend. He's a colleague. We are fellow Samunier brothers together, and we'll get into all of that on this installment of the Fathering Strong podcast. Welcome to you, and welcome to you.
Thank you.
Aaron.
Yeah,
thank you.
Glad to be here.
All right, it's a delight, man. I've been looking forward to this. So let's get right into it. We like to begin our program, first of all, by letting our guests have an opportunity to talk about their fatherhood journey. And let's start with your beginnings.
Yeah.
As a child growing up, what was your relationship with your father like?
Yeah. Interesting. I never really knew my father. I come from what they would call generational incarceration. So my grandfather and my father were all struggling with incarceration, in and out of prison, So that meant that I really didn't know my father. He would come home after doing a stint in prison, and he would get back together with my mom, and that usually wasn't good because of the challenges and the vices in his life. So my memories of my father were not good, just very violent and caught up in a lot of the things that, kept putting him back in prison, But I always had a point of contact because his mother raised me, so my grandmother. So there was always the presence, even though he wasn't there, there was just that connection there, and that his mother was raising me. So I grew up without my father in most ways. And the men in my life were struggling with the same things that my father was struggling with. So my uncles and my older cousins and stuff. So it was kind of a weird dynamic there going on, because there was just no relationship. There was no anything that would resemble a father-son relationship,
No bonding had taken place at all?
No. There's a few times I can maybe count on one hand where I remember him showing up at a sporting events. I was into sports, basketball, football, things like that. And so growing up, I remember him coming to a few of those games. And the crazy thing is, one of the proudest moments as a kid when he would show up. So even though I didn't know him, I was still longing for his approval or someone's approval. And even to this day, we struggle. We have connected. He is obviously now older and not doing the things that he was doing, and so we've been trying to build a little bit, but very much a stranger. Yeah.
So how would you describe the impact of that upon you? Hurt, anger, or just nothing? Sometimes I feel nothing for that person.
Yeah.
How would you describe your inmost impact from your father's absence?
A wide range of emotions. I think for most of my life, I was just hurt. Because at the end of the day, even at 47 years old with 3 children myself, there's still an ache in my heart for my dad. There's still a longing for my father, and that was always the case. And there was times where I hated that longing was there, and I would try to suppress it. But I think in my healing process, what I've realized is that void is a real void. It doesn't need to be explained away or somehow not dealt with. So I think hurt, just wanting approval. There's certainly been times of anger, especially with our interactions now, because I think what he has done is suppressed some things because of shame and guilt like that. So sometimes he talks as if, there was never a gap. So that can make me angry. Because there is a wound there that's deep, and that God is still healing, So, and then I think sadness for him, he feels the weight of not being my father.
I get that. So what was he then, just for my own clarity, was he also raised fatherless? Yeah. So he's got his own hurt. Yes. And it has been passed on.
Right.
But at the same time, he's hurting from his own void. Yeah. Fatherhood void.
Oh, absolutely. It's generational, like I said. So it's funny, not funny, it's sad actually. But, God breaks those cycles. But my great-grandfather was a womanizer and was killed by a woman because of infidelity and things like that. My grandfather was a womanizer and was killed by a woman because of those type of things. And then my father was a womanizer, and he was shot by a woman, but thankfully he didn't die. So, there's been generational brokenness and hurt. And I realize that's where the sadness comes from. Like, I really believe, by God's grace, I have truly forgiven my dad. That stage is over. And I don't get a lot of triggers. I don't get a lot of moments where the anger sets in like it used to. I think God has brought healing in the forgiveness area, but it's really sadness because of his story. He dropped out of school when he was 13 or 14, and because he had to work, and he just, had a lot of father wounds himself.
Right.
Yeah.
So the encouraging thing is that you have forgiven, and that forgiveness has really become complete, because the very definition of complete forgiveness is when you no longer feel the hurt, you no longer feel the pain and all the negative, toxic emotions, because you have forgiven. Yeah. And therefore, that's a wonderful thing for you.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Freedom.
It doesn't impact him, but it's freedom for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And because of that, maybe it's a consequence or maybe in conjunction with it, you have destroyed that curse because you have parented in a different way.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So your children are not experiencing that generational curse.
Right.
It's been destroyed because of you. And now they have a chance to raise up their children in a better way because of the example that you set.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to kind of summarize that for anyone that might be watching, and perhaps they are feeling the pain. The father wound is still very real with them.
Yeah.
This, I hope, gives you hope that you see that it is possible to overcome even generational fatherlessness and destroy that curse and make a new start for your family line.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, what enabled you to do that?
Well, I would say two things. Obviously, just my relationship with God, because I was heading down that same road that my father I actually went down that road. So when I was 18, I actually went to prison for 3 years for some of the same things that he was doing. And so again, that generational boulder was rolling right down that hill. But I had a real encounter with Jesus, not jailhouse religion, not, because I saw a lot of that, but
Sure.
An encounter with Jesus that has changed my life for the rest of my life. So that was huge. The healing that comes with that, a father who is patient and kind and never leaves, never forsakes, is there with me in my struggle, big enough for my questions and my hurt and my wounds. So that number one in and of itself has been huge for me. Even in my forgiveness with my dad, it's just understanding my need for forgiveness daily and how Jesus has taken that and done for me what I couldn't do for myself. So that number one, just that real relationship with God that is life-giving and real and intimate. And I think secondly, because when I became a father, I read a ton of books and thought I had a clue, but then once I became a father, I realized I didn't. So it was God working with me. But the second thing was having men in my life, other fathers, to model for me, because I genuinely had not seen it. And I married when I was young, so none of my peers at the time were, fathers or anything like that. So I came out of prison, went to Bible college, and started full-time ministry. So I sort of hit the ground running. Mm-hmm. And so I was starting from scratch on my fatherhood journey, and I was overwhelmed, but there were just godly fathers who took me under their wing and modeled for me, how to talk to your children, how to discipline. Because even though I thought in my head that I never would be anything like what I grew up with, there was still tendencies or reactions Sure. or things that I saw that if I wasn't careful would become normal for me. So
Sure.
I think those two things, just God and his ever-present life in me, and then just people taking me under their wing and helping me, other fathers, seasoned fathers.
Where did you find those seasoned fathers?
Yeah, I think of the two that were so impactful. One was at church, and then one was the ministry that I worked with. And so those two, man. So yeah, these were men of faith as well, who had their own stories of God bringing freedom to them. And so there was a lot of relational, yeah, it was just beautiful.
Yeah.
Just how they took me under their wings and as men of faith. And one had a similar story. The other one, actually, complete opposite. Grew up with both parents, kind of affluent. I grew up in an under-resourced community and violence and those type of things. He grew up in the complete opposite. And so I had one who knew my story or could relate, and then I had another one who really couldn't, but yet both were so key in my development.
Wow, that's kind of like the perfect scenario.
Yeah.
But you got a chance to see the other side.
Yeah, absolutely.
While also having someone who identified totally with your upbringing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, you're blessed.
Yeah, I thank God for that. There's still men like that in my life for all facets of my life. So God has been very faithful in always putting men in my life. I think he knows I need it. So
well, we all do.
Yeah.
We all do.
You've been one of those, Eli. So I
you.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Oh, it's been a privilege just to know you and be a part of your life. So I just wanted to remind our viewers here, this is what Fathering Strong is all about. We men need each other.
Oh, yeah.
we often have a hard time admitting that,
Mm-hmm.
and difficulty opening up and sharing our hurt and all the things that we're going through with other men.
Yeah.
But when you do, there is a benefit from it that you're not going to get anywhere else.
Yeah.
We need other men.
That's right.
Who relate to us and who can share with us things that come from the depth of their heart. Mm-hmm. That will resonate with us and help us on our journey of being the best fathers they can be. So we encourage many fathers who are watching to consider being a part of Fathering Strong. It's simple. We'll tell you how to do that as we close out the program. In the meantime, we're going to take a pause right here. My guest is Aaron Roy. Aaron will continue with us, and I'm going to ask him about the challenges and joys of being a father when the Fathering Strong podcast continues after this break.
Do you know a new father who could benefit from a basic introduction to healthy fathering principles? POPS 101, a free online course consisting of 4 one-hour sessions in English or Spanish, could be perfect for him. POPS 101 lays out practical steps toward becoming the protector, order keeper, provider, and stabilizer his child needs. Learn more at urbanlight.org.
Welcome back. This is the Fathering Strong podcast. I'm Eli Williams. My guest today is Aaron Roy. Aaron is a friend. He's a colleague. We are a part of Semunye. Semunye is a group of pastors and other ministry leaders who meet together on a regular basis, building our relationships. And we are different, meaning we're diverse. We've got white brothers and black, and we've got Haitian, and we've got Puerto Rican.
Yeah.
And we get together and we become friends because our goal is to see the entire church body look like that, where all those walls have come down and we are identifying as brothers and sisters in Christ so that we can really do what Jesus told us to do, and that is to love one another as he loved us. And you can only do that through relationships.
That's right.
We are Semunye, and you're now our de facto leader. We're going to have to make it official one of these days and actually vote you in as the leader. So, Aaron, you shared your story about your upbringing, your lack of good fathering in your life, but how that through forgiveness and through mentoring and, of course, through the Lord, you have been able to destroy that curse off of your family line. So you didn't pass on to your children what you were given from your father in particular. And that's a wonderful thing. We thank God for that, and we applaud you for that. So you are a father now. Talk to us about your journey as a father. How many children, their genders, and something about their different personalities.
So, I have 3 kids, and we at one time we were 3 kids under 4.
And he's saying we because there is a lovely little lady that he's married to, and we want to hear that story too about how the two of you met. Her name is Sugar. Real name.
That's her real name. She's sweet.
How did you meet?
So, we both, when I got out of prison, I went to Chicago to go to the Moody Bible Institute. And she was there as a missions major. She wanted to do international missions. And so we were there. I had seen her many a time. She probably never saw me. But there was a time where we met each other. And she came up to me, and she's from Puerto Rico. My wife is from Puerto Rico, and she thought I was Puerto Rican. I'm not Puerto Rican at all. I'm my father's black and my mother's white, so I'm fair-skinned. But it was kind of summer, and I was much darker and not the winter like it is now. And so she came up talking to me in Spanish. And I just thought she was so beautiful, I didn't want to blow it. So I just kept nodding my head saying, "Sí." That was the only Spanish I knew was "sí." So she kept talking and talking, and I just kept nodding my head and saying "sí." And then eventually she figured out within, about a minute that I didn't know any Spanish. So that was my introduction to my wife, was me deceiving her, or trying to deceive her, and because I didn't want to blow the opportunity of talking with her. So we that started our friendship, me trying to speak Spanish or pretend like I knew Spanish. And but yeah, she is the love of my life. We've been married going on 23 years. This coming year will be 23 years. And we have 3 kids. We got married pretty young, and we had 3 kids within 4 years of marriage. So we didn't waste any time. I don't know if I suggest that to anyone, but it was great. So I have 2 boys. Aaron, who is my oldest, and then Isaiah, who's my middle child, and then Eden, who's my only daughter, my princess. That's her name in our house. She pretty much runs that house. But yeah, 3 kids in 4 years, without knowing how to be a dad. It was really interesting, but at the same time, it was really fun because I was excited for it. So made a ton of mistakes. But I went into my fathering journey with my kids, and I don't even think this is healthy, but I went in saying I'm not going to be anything like what
you experienced.
What I experienced.
Yeah.
And that's not vision. That's kind of an anti-vision in a sense. It's like, I'm not going to be this.
Common though.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Very common.
Yes.
And sometimes helpful. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it didn't give me a vision for fatherhood. It sort of just said, here's a baseline. Don't do that.
Right.
Instead of a vision of very intentional and practical things to be a father, it was, here's what I'm not going to be.
Exactly.
So that doesn't last too long. That can keep you from, that kept me from violence, that kept me from doing some of the unhealthy things that I saw growing up, but it didn't give me a vision, and so I just remember being so excited and wanting to spend time. Here's the other thing that was very interesting about my new fathering journey was I was in full-time ministry, and I was ripping and running constantly. And I thought that's what I was supposed to do, the Lord's work. And no one had discipled me up to that point about my first ministry being my wife and my children. And so I almost lost my marriage. So my fathering journey started off rough because I was ripping and running, thinking I was doing the Lord's work. And at the same time, my wife was at home with 3 kids under 4, needing her husband and their father. And so I remember coming home to a long letter that my wife had handwritten, essentially saying, I can't do this anymore.
Because you had not had a model of healthy, nurturing fathering.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? You just did the opposite of what your father did. But in some ways, it wasn't that different because you were still absent.
Yes.
Even though you might have been physically present more than your father was.
Right.
You were absent emotionally.
Yes.
Relationally and spiritually and all those other ways. Am I
Yeah, absolutely.
correct?
And didn't even know it. Because again, I think I hit the ground running coming out of prison and just went hard after ministry. And
so that letter woke you up.
Oh my goodness. So we had been married about 4 years at that point, and I quit ministry altogether for a season, and we moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, because if we would have stayed in Chicago, I knew I would. There was just a network and a rhythm that was there that wouldn't. I just didn't have the strength to stop, or to be healthy in that way. So I moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and had a friend down there, and I got a job painting from 7 a.m. to 2. And I would just come home, and I didn't know a lot of people. It was just being with my wife and being with my kids. And that was the best thing that ever happened to us as far as our journey together.
Great move.
Yeah.
Great move.
And it was hard. Don't get me wrong, Eli.
Yeah.
Like, I had some unhealthy identity with ministry, just jumping out and getting in. And because of my story, people wanted to hear what I had to say, so to speak, or put me in roles and positions that my character wasn't even ready for. My story went before me, and so that was where I would say my fathering journey really began to take hold and take some roots, because that's what I was focused on, just being a husband and being a father. And
is that where you found mentors?
Yeah, well, one of them. One of them was there. Dear brother who was a pastor of a small church that in my neighborhood that I began to go to. And that was one of them. But I also think it was just the concept of time. Like, I just had time and made time, and intentionality became a real concept to me.
You prioritized your family.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So started off rough, but then found, like, again, I started with an anti-vision. Like you said, it was a baseline of no violence, be there physically, da-da-da-da. But there was no vision for that, and it got me in trouble in my early fathering. But, we just really bonded as a family down there, and that sort of, I would say, is foundational to my parenting and my fathering going forward, was that season in Chattanooga.
Every father, especially fathers with a story similar to yours, needs to hear your story. Because it gives so much hope, and there's so much wisdom there, that some of it you learned the hard way.
Oh, man.
To be able to pass that on
for sure.
to these young fathers, I think is priceless. So thank you for this, because hopefully we'll be able to share this with thousands
Amen.
Of young dads, some not so young, who need to hear your story. Now, there's a lot more to your story. We may have to make this a two-parter because there's just so much there that I'd like to mine, and bring to the surface. But for this installment, let me move to the challenges of fathering 3 children so close in age, and you and your wife are still very young yourselves. What were your biggest challenges in parenting them?
Well, my wife also didn't have a lot of good models. So initially we were just winging it, like I said, but then as we began to get some foundations, kids change so fast. I think that was always the challenge, and it still is a challenge with a 21, a 20-year-old and a 17-year-old, or I think that's their ages. We always felt like we were one stage behind. So we were getting good at one stage of development for them, and then we realized they're on to the next, and we're still stuck in the other one. So that was a challenge. It really was. Like, we worked hard at trying to be to meet them where they're at in that stage of development. And as soon as we felt like we got a handle, they had already went on to the next one. So that was a big challenge. I think the other thing, as I think about it, kids are so different. And so my oldest son is just like me in all the glory of it and all the bad of it. And so, we butted heads at first because I seen in him some of the things that thankfully God had revealed that were good and that had been redeemed, but I'd also seen some of the things,
Not so good.
Yeah. So we butted heads, but I think just learning that each kid needs different things. And I didn't learn that like early as most people. Like I felt like we went through the bumps and bruises of figuring that out. How, my oldest son, he really loves to interact over sports and because he's, like me, he was into those type of things, and his love language is time and touch. And I had to learn that over the years, because kids don't express that, so it is about paying attention. And then my youngest son, he is the complete opposite. He does want nothing to do with sports. He's a man of few words, and yet he loves quality time, and he loves nature and those type of things. And then my daughter, who's my princess, she has changed so much. So I feel like the challenge of getting to know your kids, and it's a beautiful challenge, don't get me wrong, but I think just the intentionality of getting to know your kids, because they are so different and they need different things from you. So yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge, was knowing and understanding my kids and their love languages and what they actually needed from me, because what my son Aaron Jr. needs from me was totally different than what Isaiah needs from me. And then in particular, both of those were different from what my only daughter needed from me. So that's a challenge still to this day.
Sure. They get older, but they're still who they are.
Yeah,
right?
They're still my kids, and they still love their dad, thankfully, and want a dad in their life.
Yeah. Well, you and Sugar have done a marvelous job with your children. When we come back after this break, we'd like for you to share your greatest joys of parenting, and we'll ask you to speak a word of encouragement to any dads and even moms who may be listening to this installment of the Fathering Strong podcast. My guest is Aaron Roy. I'm Eli Williams, and we'll return with some final thoughts right after this.
Do you know a new father who could benefit from a basic introduction to healthy fathering principles? POPS 101, a free online course consisting of 4 one-hour sessions in English or Spanish, could be perfect for him. POPS 101 lays out practical steps toward becoming the protector, order keeper, provider, and stabilizer his child needs. Learn more at urbanlight.org.
Welcome back to the Fathering Strong podcast. Eli Williams here with Aaron Roy, and Aaron has been sharing quite a bit about his fatherhood journey and now his own fathering story, and it has all been very enlightening, very encouraging. It has been great to have you here, and we want to now switch gears and give you an opportunity to share with our audience what the greatest joys of being a father and co-parent has been in raising your 3 children while also juggling your very important missionary work.
Yeah, man, I just love my kids. I in all their quirkiness and all their goodness and and all their struggles. So I think just the joy of seeing them grow up and develop with hope, number one, because I felt like growing up I never really had that hope. And I realized that having a father and a mother that is active in your life gives you hope and vision, and confidence, And so I think some of the joys of just seeing that they have what I didn't have, they have joy, they have confidence, they have a support system, and that breeds, security and a certain level of I can do this, and I grew up so insecure. Not only not having a father makes you insecure and those wounds, but growing up even in poverty and in violence, those all contribute to who you are. And so to see my kids not have to worry about, by God's grace, meals, to see my kids be assured in our love for them is I know that sounds kind of simplistic, but that is amazing for me. And I'm still blown away by that. I mean, my son, who's about to turn 21, and my other son, they're both January birthdays, so next month they'll be 21 and 20. He came home from working. He's going to school and working. He's in college and working. And he came home last night even and just like, hey, Dad, and just began to tell me about his day and a customer that he had just struggled with. And so I think what's been beautiful and joyful is like we have a really good relationship. And I thank God for that. And he wants to tell me how his day is because he trusts me. Mm-hmm. and he knows that I'm a safe space. And I didn't have that. Because I didn't feel that way about my father. I always thought when in our limited interaction, he would be gone. Mm-hmm. Eventually, he would be gone. So what's the point of trying to build anything? Or it wasn't a safe space because of the violence and things like that. But like just my son coming home at about to be 21, telling me about his day, asking me a question about things. And it's just, I think, the joy has been that in spite of all my mistakes, because I've made plenty, and Sugar and I will both admit that, but we're a close family. Like my kids don't want to leave my house. Now they have to eventually, but they feel safe, and I can't express how much joy that brings me because I had the opposite. I never felt safe in my home because of the challenges there. I never wanted to be in that space because of the challenges of violence and alcoholism and things like that. So we have worked hard in trying to create a space that we call home. And Sugar, my wife, just does an amazing job of, everything from decorating every holiday to she's such a wonderful cook. And my kids genuinely love to be in that space. And that's foreign to me as far as my experience. Yeah. So that's so much joy. I'd be remiss not to mention baptizing my children as they made professions of faith and at different times in their life, and different journeys. Even their faith journeys have been different, and ups and downs and the roller coasters of that. Growing up as pastors' kids and those challenges that come with that. So, I just love our home. And I love to be home with my kids. And our kids love to be home with us. And they're at a place of discovery now that, they're young men and my young woman as my kids. So, it's been good to see them. And the other joy thing, and I'll say this, is they love to serve. They grew up serving people, and that has lasted with them. They love to serve, so that brings me great joy. They grew up serving meals, growing up in under-resourced communities because that's where we planted and pastored churches, and
such an encouraging story.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And I'd like you to take a couple of minutes to look right into that camera and talk to a man who may be watching and he's having struggles in his fathering, and say something encouraging, something inspirational to him.
Yeah. Well, I think Number one, brother, pray to God for, if you have that relationship with God, pray for godly men, because God is really good at providing that. And so I would say, number one, just God is a good father who loves to surround you with fathers. And so I can't encourage you enough to pray for that. And then secondly, I think you just have to be resilient. And I know many of you are. And I think that with all the mistakes and with all the craziness, being resilient is such a virtue. It is such a beautiful thing, and God gives us that. So continue in your resilience, even in all your mistakes. Those seeds, those foundational things that you're doing with your children, they make a difference. And so, yeah, be resilient.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Hang in there. And another thing you can do is become a part of Fathering Strong. Go to www.fatheringstrong.com, and there you will find a pathway for being a part of a virtual community of fathers. Perhaps even start your own virtual group designed especially for fathers. There are lots of resources on our websites, including these podcasts. There are weekly blog posts. There are fatherhood classes there, lots of videos, and all kinds of resources that will help you in your fathering. That's www.fatheringstrong.com. Our main website is urbanlight.org. Check them out and join us for the next installment of the Fathering Strong podcast. And stay tuned, because we'll be having a part 2 with Aaron Roy, because we didn't even touch on his church planting work and his work with the Nehemiah Foundation. Just so many things we have yet to delve into, how he has juggled all that successfully and maintained his focus on being a good father and a good husband to his wife. So thanks again, Aaron, for joining us, and thank all of you. We'll see you next time on the next installment of the Fathering Strong podcast.
Fathering Strong is powered by Urban Light Ministries, a not-for-profit organization serving the needs of families and children for nearly 30 years. Your support helps us continue turning the hearts of fathers to their children, while meeting some of the immediate critical needs of struggling families with small children. Contributions of all sizes are welcomed at www.urbanlight.org.
The Fathering Strong podcast is a production of Urban Light Ministries, with technical assistance from the Momentum Group, and Harold Rayford provides the theme music. So thank you for listening.